The Could Be Better podcast network is sponsored in part by the Frederick Let There Be Rock School. Let There Be Rock School, located in Frederick, provides a world-renowned music lesson program and an unparalleled after-school rock and roll community center. Listeners can now get their first lesson free when you tell them Could Be Better sent you. Visit www.frederickrockschool.com and click the contact button in the top right-hand corner of the page to get yourself started.
Again, listeners of the show get their first lesson free if you tell them Could Be Better sent you. It's not too late or too early to learn your favorite Olivia Rodrigo, Dragon Force, or the Black Keys song. So go now to www.frederickrockschool.com and reach out today for your first free lesson.
This is a very special episode. At least to me, this is a very special episode. I kind of dragged Chris along for a lot of this. I don't know if he had a good time. I don't know if he enjoyed it. I don't know what he actually thinks. We'll find out now live on air. But this is a very special episode to me. We are switching everything up this season for the podcast. Chris said last week's episode that we weren't going to tell you how these formats were going to be. I guess we're still not going to tell you, but we can at least tell you what this format's going to be. So Chris, take it away. Tell people what they've got.
So this month, the third episode of each month is going to be a special peek.
The second.
So it's the third. So
it's the third. Okay.
We have our musical guest where we spend a undisclosed but comfortable amount of time with a guest. Our second episode of the month is a no music podcast where we don't talk about anything music related. So now that you're back, you're like, where's the music? We still kind of don't have any, but it's in a different way. And what's cool is this is actually a long form edition of Colin's interestingly named article in the paper that is called Musician to Musician.
Well,
and
it's not going to be what this is, though. Not this week, but
this piece is not Musician to Musician.
No, yeah, go ahead.
But this is a long form excerpt of an interview that Colin did with the former executive director of the Weinberg Center for the Arts here in Frederick, Maryland, John Healey. And so Colin was right. We went to a retirement going away party for John a couple weeks ago at this point. And I didn't know John all that well. And it was going to this event was really cool. It was at a place that we used to book that we loved working with and we loved putting shows at, New Spire Stages. And it was a really good time.
It was. I did have a good time. I don't know if you did, but I did have a good time.
I stayed the whole time. We stayed the whole time.
Well, I don't think we were expecting to. There was a speaker part where people spoke, and I don't think either of us anticipated that happening for 45 minutes, however long that was.
Yeah, it was a stretch. I mean, there was a whole award ceremony of, paper on a paper thing that they gave to them. And then, from the city and the county and different things like that. But then, the people on John's team gave him really nice plaques, and the Weinberg family gave him a really cool screen printed thing. And it was a beautiful ceremony. And then, okay, so we're kind of burying the lead a little bit here, but I didn't know John all that well. I've met him a couple of times when you and I have talked to him about Could Be Better things and just kind of learning some things from John that he's learned over the years and was willing to share with us. That is special to me. But it was cool being like, it almost was kind of set up like a roast, and we kind of thought that was going to happen. We walk into the New Spire Stages and there's a little podium thing and then a hot seat chair. Yeah. And I was like, well, what did I walk into? Did I need to grab fruit on my way in? And it was really special. John got up at the end and said it was a great speech. And there's
go ahead. No.
Yeah. And I was just saying that there's some things that just kind of still kind of stuck with me. And I'm like, man, that was worth every second. And I'm glad we didn't leave.
Yeah, no, I was very happy to be there, and I was very happy to see people I've not seen in a long time. I was very happy to see Kara Norman. I don't even know her title at this point for the Downtown Frederick Partnership. It's, I don't know, God of all gods at this point. I don't really quite know the official title. And then we saw Sean from Showtime, who, you know, quickly told us our ideas were never going to happen, and we
Politely.
also, politely though, and Greg, and just that we saw Laura. I mean, we used to work with Laura all the time when we were booking some shows at Newspire, right?
Yeah, it was great. It was kind of a just a cool full circle moment where I didn't know John was behind so many of the cool things in Frederick that has come through. And it was really cool to be able to see John sent off in such a way that was just class. And then also kind of gave me hope that somebody that just likes to get stuff done um, is so warmly regarded. And that was really special.
Yeah. By the time you hear this, for the six of you listening, it will be out. But this sort of ran in conjunction with this piece, this long piece. I've worked on this article for a month about John Healey that will have published in the Frederick News Post by the time you hear this. I'm told it's going to be the cover.
Though they say front page.
And so, I don't know. I don't know what they're going to do. I try to stay out of that. But this, if you read that piece, you will know exactly what Chris is saying. Like when it comes to, and I do use this quote because he said it in the piece. He said, "I don't suffer fools," and he doesn't suffer fools. And I think without him, the Weinberg Center in Frederick would be wildly different, and the sort of downtown arts music scene could be wildly different as well. He spent the last almost 20 years, 19 years doing this and building this theater and truly building it into something. I love him to death. I'm going to miss him, and I'm really glad we had a chance to go to that party together. I really am.
Yeah, it was a cool Frederick memory for me for sure. Because I mean, I've always partook in some of the cool things that the Weinberg did. But I never kind of knew. I mean, you see John when you walk in, right? Because John's always there. But like,
Right.
it was never a hey, John, thanks so much for putting this on. Let's talk, whatever, blah, blah, blah. My relationship with him is vastly different than yours is. But I don't know. It was just cool. Again, people that have read the article will be touched and will see that it's a true reflection of who John is. And I hope that he also enjoys that article, but he'll probably just kind of grumble and then maybe a little tear in his eye.
No, he's not gonna. I'm sure he won't even read it. It probably. But what we're going to do here in this episode then is there's going to be some excerpts from the conversation I had with him, the biggest conversation I had with him for the piece. I recorded that. You're going to hear some of that. You're going to hear some of what other people have to say in town. I conducted a bunch of interviews for this article, so you're going to hear some of that. These are sort of the tapes that nobody hears, the things that nobody ever gets a chance to actually, when they say fake media, fake news, you're going to hear everything verbatim now. It's not my fault. So if I messed it up, don't blame me.
Did you happen to put in, before we get into our break here, did you get the quote that he said that kind of was his North Star in his farewell speech? He said, the one thing that has always kind of stuck with me is like, it was essentially, it was never lose sight of doing magnificent things, or something to that extent, of just being like, like there's always wonderment in doing something fantastic.
I don't remember. No, I don't.
Yeah.
I don't think. Yeah.
And it just kind of stuck with me because it was like, hey, it's not saying do those things, but always just lean in towards that. And I think that's kind of been John's whole thing, was he will never take credit for all these. I mean, he knows he has booked amazing things and all the things, but it was always, hey, that was great. Here's the next thing, hey, that was great, but hey, now here's this other thing. And I think I just commend someone that has that much energy in general, but then also at his age. I mean, he's not a spring chicken, and he was always just grinding. And so I just have the utmost respect for John. I'm glad that we got to celebrate his retirement, and he will never listen to this, but John, I am grateful for you. And I'm interested to see what happens next. But man, it was a good run. And so well done. Thank you for doing this for my town, for our city. And now a word from our sponsor.
This podcast is brought to you in part by Special Tees. Are you in a band that wants merch but does not know where to go? Are you looking for great quality and affordable pricing? Do you have a design that you'd like to put on a koozie for your favorite consumable beverage? How about office swag for your job or giveaway items for all of your events? Okay, you get the point now, but you have to look no further than Special Tees for all your heart's printing desires. The Could Be Better podcast listeners can act now and get 10% of your first order if you tell them Could Be Better sent you. Visit their website at www.special-tees.com or use the link in the show notes to get the conversation started. You can even call ahead and visit their showroom to see all types of products, everything that they offer. Again, telling them Could Be Better sent you via email, phone call, or carrier pigeon. It'll get you 10% off your first order. That's www.special-tees.com. Special Tees. If you haven't worked with them,
so when I
they want to work
started
with you.
To talk with John, we met at his office on a Wednesday night. If you read the article in the newspaper, you saw how that was set up. We sat down, we talked for quite a while, and one of the first things I asked him was how he got started, and I asked him to take me back to how he grew up.
I mean, I don't want to go too deep, but I was in high school, and I think when I was in 8th grade, for a public speaking class, I memorized a play overnight. So jump forward to I'm a senior, I'm doing all kinds of other activities, and I had, I think, one line in a Thornton Wilder play, the school play called The Skin of Our Teeth. Mm-hmm. And Friday morning, during the morning announcements during high school, there is, could Bruce McCormick, John Healey, and Dwayne come to Miss Gates' office, after the morning announcement. Mm-hmm. So I went in, and she said, one of the three of you memorized a play for me overnight when you were in my public speaking class. Who was it? And I said, well, it was me. And she goes, well, and the lead in the play, who was scared to death of, this is like a week before the show goes up, mm-hmm. Had been put on warning for smoking in the school. And then, of course, the first thing he did is light a cigarette. So he got kicked out of school, kicked out of the play. And so she said, I need someone, who can step in and do this. And the other two guys immediately said, oh, my God, you're an idiot if you do it, right? So I said, fine, I'll be an idiot. And, and so I did it, and I memorized the play over the weekend. It's a big part. And I was good. As good as a guy with no training in high school could be. I was comfortable with the audience. I guess that's the best way to put it. And so that was the start. I got cast in a one-act play festival that went to the Castleton State College in Vermont, where they were holding the New England finals that year. Chairman of the board saw me that night, offered me, said, we'll get you here, on a full ride scholarship. If you do the work, he picked me and this other woman to develop his new department around. Wow. So it was great. So I had 4 years of, here we go. And he believed in teaching everything. Mm-hmm. So you learn backstage as well as on stage. And it wasn't just acting, Mm-hmm. So that got me started, to which then, summer stock and growing out of it. And then when I got out of college, I said, well, this is what I want to do. You know, I guess, you know, that's what is, apparently this, I can do this. And so, went to New York, was not ready for New York, not acting wise, but living wise. To go from Vermont to New York City is a big leap.
So was that, you grew up in Vermont?
I grew up in Vermont.
Okay.
Yep. Sorry. I grew up as a farmer. I was a farm boy. I've shoveled more shit than you've probably seen. Yeah, I grew up as a farmer, and a dairy farm, small dairy farm that my father worked at a hydroelectric plant right there it's the southernmost corner of Vermont, a place called Vernon.
Is that where the name of the town
That's the name of the town, yeah. You know, and the high school was Brattleboro Union, as a regional high school. So that's where I grew up. This was at that point, a very involved hobby for my father. He worked full time while my mother and I started doing the work on the farm. I think when I was 10 or 11, I can remember him coming into the bedroom before I went to bed, and he took his arm and he said, "Okay, pull my arm down." You know, and of course it was a challenge. So I pulled his arm down and he goes, "Good, you have enough strength to start carrying the milk pails." So what would happen is that I would prepare we could milk 3 cows at a time. And so I prepare the first 3 so that as he drove into the driveway from work, the preparation was done. You know, and the first 3 were being milked and almost done by the time he took over.
Wow.
You know, so, and then that developed into, basically my mother and I ran the farm quite a bit.
Growing up on that farm in Vermont, John was actually not all that far away from somebody who would turn out to be his wife years later. That person would be Patricia Kelly. I had the opportunity to speak with her about John, and she gave me the origin story about how they met.
Oh, piece of cake. Okay. How to put this succinctly? Both John and I had. I don't even know if you know that. We're from the same hometown. Did you know that?
I did not know that. No.
Yeah, we're from. Well, he grew up just outside, but we went to the same high school. It was a union high school, which means it has feeders from all the small towns around Brattleboro. We both went to Brattleboro Union High School. I didn't know him in high school because he's 2 years younger than I am. So, of course, you know, it's high school. Grades make a big difference. So we, besides college, then we both struck out. He, you know, was doing his acting thing. And I actually, I went right into cardiovascular nursing, and I noticed that right about retirement, which I've since reminded him, right about retirement, people had, either right before, during, or after, had heart attacks. I'm going, well, this is a stupid way to retire. So I retired when I was about 24. Bought a car, gas was cheap, I never went anyplace because I was always saving up to go to college. Mm-hmm. And, you know, then when I get a real job, I had, oh my God, this is lots of money. I think it was like $2,000 a year or something stupid like that. So I went cross country, ended up actually living in Mexico with a girlfriend, an ex-roommate. And we eventually ran out of money, so I returned to town. So we both returned to town I came about a year or two before him. And so I was dating this guy who was captain of a softball team, and the softball field was right across from where he lived. Mm. So they were missing people at some game, and they asked him to come to the game and be a player on the team. Now, understand, it's a small town. There's not much to do in a small town. You have to create your own entertainment. And so softball was a big deal. And he joined the team, and I'm going, who the heck is that? And so, and after a softball game, it is it's just mandatory that you get together afterwards so the guys can complain about who did what wrong. And all the girlfriends, wives, whatever, we just chatted and gossiped about people. So I don't remember what, but I remember making a remark that we went to a bar. The team was supported by a bar called Mort's Bar. And Mort, he was. Anyways, I remember when we were there at the bar, he was near me, maybe at the same table. I remember this scene looks like a Lena Wertmüller film. I don't know if you know Lena Wertmüller films.
I don't. So can you describe it a little?
She's German, and you can look it up. She's German, but she was actually an Italian film director. Mm-hmm. And it was very, it was always women who, a very unique perspective, like women who had big butts, and she would direct the camera behind them. Mm. So it was just an odd, it was very odd. And I've always loved films. I'm not a film snob. I go to anything and everything. I go to animated films. I go to everything. I just have always liked films. So when I said it was a Lena Wertmüller film in a small town like Brattleboro, Vermont, I knew that, or I thought, nobody would get it. Nobody would go with me to these films. He got it and laughed. And so I'm going, good looking and smart, or at least arty.
And so the rest, as they say, is
and eventually
history
he
now.
Asked me out.
Pat and John have been together for decades. In fact, I think they're coming up on somewhere around 50 years being together. They've been married. They've been together 3 years longer than they've been married, but I know that it's in the 40s. And congratulations to them on that, and for having a wonderful young daughter, Drew. She's not so young anymore. They actually have grandkids, but you get the point. From there, though, John explained to me how he ended up here in Frederick at the Weinberg Center. There was a lot of traveling. He lived in New York at one point. He lived in Philadelphia at one point. And then he heard about Washington, D.C., and he decided to move to D.C. in the 1970s to get started acting still and being a theater manager, chasing his dreams, doing all of those things. Some things worked out, some didn't, until he found himself about 200 miles away from D.C. in Virginia, Lexington, Virginia, I believe it was, at Lime Kiln. It was a theater that he took over and ran for a while until that job didn't work out either. And so he found himself coming to Frederick, or at least thinking he was coming to Frederick for a job interview as sort of a last-ditch effort to find work in the theater world. He could have just gone back to working dinner theater or going, working community theaters, but there was one last chance, at least at this moment in his life, to be a leader or to take a leadership role within the arts community in a community Frederick turned out to be at. The problem, though, as you'll hear, was that things didn't go all that smoothly at first.
I came up early before my interview. Marilyn, she's over at Delaplane now.
Is she?
She's their space rental.
Oh, okay.
I can't remember. Oh, Ordzinger. Yeah. Mm-hmm. She was, I think at the time, before Sean, the head of the Arts Council.
Oh, really?
And she, I walk in off the street just to get brochures, see what's going on. This because I hadn't been to Frederick. I had friends in Frederick, and we would come up for lost weekends and things, but hadn't really spent any time in Frederick. Mm-hmm. And I walk into the Arts Council just to try to get some information, and Marilyn's there all by herself. She doesn't know me from Adam. Asked me what I'm doing in town. I said, well, I'm here to interview with the city. And she just unloads. I mean, I'm sitting there going, check, please. Can I leave now? Yeah. So I go to the interview. Who was the alderman? Chip, openly gay alderman, had since passed. but I remember, and Catherine Moreland from the Delaplane was on the committee. Pete Michaels was the chair of the board, and then somebody from HR from the city was there. And Chip fell asleep in my interview. I could see him nodding, fighting it. So my mind is going, this is going great. I'm putting people to sleep. And then somebody asked me the question of, are you gonna move to Frederick, right? To which my answer was, after the last 3 years and the record of the places, no. I'm going to keep the house that I have for now. Maybe down the road, if you don't fire me tomorrow, maybe I'll consider it. So he was like,
and being honest helped, right?
It's like I went into that interview going, I don't give a shit.
Yeah.
I mean, there are other things that I could do in my life.
Yeah.
I've directed a bunch of shows now, so I can start doing that again. I can go back to acting in DC and doing commercials and all this kind of stuff. So I walked in because I wanted to see if I could do it.
Right.
At Limekiln, the focus had been theater, with the concerts were a side element.
Yeah.
And it turned out to be, I learned very quickly that's where we're making our money.
Right.
Potentially. It was made very clear to me at I was hired in May. My first day was June 5th, 2006.
There was a quick turnaround.
Yeah, there were no records. Everything, there were some records, but Michael Stupp, who had been the full-time managing director before me, Susie Miller, had been acting interim while they hired somebody. Susie wasn't big on the computer, so everything was written down. Michael, you couldn't read a thing, of anything. So I decided very early on that I don't care what happened in the past. I really don't. I mean, it didn't take me long to figure out by looking at the records that they overpaid. They didn't draw.
Karen Norman is the executive director of the Downtown Frederick
seats.
Partnership, a nonprofit group here in Frederick, Maryland, that is responsible for a lot of the really cool things that go down all around downtown, Market Street, and beyond even. I had a chance to talk to her about John's time here at the Weinberg, and I wanted especially to ask her about the fact that they both kind of came to town at the same time. So, with that said, I asked her if she recalled what it was like when John first got to the Weinberg and how much trouble the Weinberg was in. She admitted she has a hard time with some of these memories, but she did her best to recall exactly how things were.
I will say generically, because in those early years, I feel like the Weinberg was struggling as well, because obviously I go to a lot of city meetings because of my job, and I frequently heard it may still be this way, but at that point, the backstop, if they had a year that was a net negative, the city would have to make that up. Mm-hmm. In those early years, in my recollection, which is probably better to check with John, but I remember that happening, that a lot, that I felt like when John was responding to those questions, comments, the things that happened, like, why is this the case? It was very clear that he was working really hard to address that. So I think that we both walked into things that were in need of assistance. The partnership story is totally different than that, but it's.
And as we know from there, John did turn things around. The Weinberg Center for the Arts has been the cornerstone of downtown Frederick, Maryland for quite some time now. In his nearly 20 years of running the place, he has turned it from where it was before into something that is actually profitable for the city, a feat that should not go unnoticed. One of the things he did, of course, was bring the Discovery Series, a pay-as-you-want concert slate that has artists up and coming. You can pay anything from nothing to $10 to even more than that if you want to see tomorrow's stars. He's also brought in so many cool acts like, Esperanza Spalding and Gregory Porter. I was very excited to see him myself. And then Somi, I love Somi. And there was also one of his favorites, David Sedaris. I asked John if he could share a story or two about some of his favorite moments while running the Weinberg, and he had a very funny one to offer.
That's part of the joy of this, is every day is going to be different. There's going to be a different challenge. There's going to be something that comes up. So, yes, picking up David Sedaris and driving him, which I don't do anymore. Where I hire a company now to do it. But picking him up, driving him back. Once you get Sedaris in the car, you never had to worry about conversation.
Yeah.
David would give it to you. But we were driving back after he finished signing at like 2 a.m, 3 a.m. He was staying at the Four Seasons in Georgetown. And I'm driving down the GW Parkway, and it's quiet in the car. Mm-hmm. And I look over, and David is asleep in the seat, mm-hmm. right? And I went, okay, great. And then all of a sudden, he just popped up. And his eyes bugged out, and he goes, I ain't never seen a woodchuck in South Carolina, and then went right back to down asleep. And the next day, when I picked him up, take him to the airport, he goes, did I say something about South Carolina last night? And I went, yeah, you did, David. And then I bumped into his agent at APAP, and I told him the story. He goes, oh, you were the guy. And I went, yeah. So Sedaris is a favorite. He's the only person that I've ever literally fallen out of my seat laughing. I've never done with anybody else. And we've had some pretty funny comedians in here. Yeah. But his first time in here, and him telling some of the stories, he was hilarious. That's a favorite. The fact that Emmylou Harris came here, and Emmylou always traveled with recovery dogs. That seems to be her thing. Yeah. And we had just put new carpets in the theater, and one of their dogs shat, and she made no move to do anything about it. It's like, that's your problem, So I went, okay, I'll remember that. And she was nice and everything. It was good. And so it's like you get the Brian Stevenson coming in on the same day as one of Ted Cruz's last political appearances, and cleanse the theater. Right. And again, I brought in Brian Stevenson's 3 years too early, probably. Yeah. But you meet these people who know what they're doing and know what they want and are comfortable in their skins. Mm-hmm. And so your life could potentially change. Yeah. Even for a second. Yeah. You meet these people, and you hear all the horror stories about prima donnas, and there's been one or two, that I've had to deal with, and it's like, you're not important to me. I don't care. I'll solve your problem for you. Right. But in the grand scheme of things, you're not going to be around much longer either. Yeah. And I think they know it. Yeah. I think they know that they're a flash in the pan, and that they're scared. Mm-hmm. And they're panicked that it's going away too fast. And so those are the people that you go, okay, sorry you're having a bad time.
Someone who didn't have a bad time, at least for the most part, over the last 20 years was Greg Davis, the Weinberg's technical manager. I had a chance to catch up with him and talk about working with John for the better part of 2 decades. And when it came down to it, I asked Greg, who knows John pretty much as well as anybody professionally in this town, what Frederick and what Greg himself will miss the most now that John has retired.
Jeez. Well, that is a tough one. There are obvious things. There are obvious things that are, hey, the new marquee, mm-hmm. the new bar, he got the entire seat, all of the seating replaced, the entire painting of the entire theater, bathroom or dressing room renovations. There's
all of the physical stuff. But honestly, because of everything and everybody that I have gone through prior to John, I think that part of his legacy that probably won't be mentioned as much as everything else is just his dedication to taking the historic building and the historic theater, bringing it into the eyes of because the fact of the matter is the taxpayers do a good amount of funding for the building. And when I started, the theater was in the red, and the taxpayers were not loving the building, and why is the city doing this? And and he got the community support back to the building. He helped bring the community back to the building, support in not only financial sponsors, but just physical bodies in the building. People that, had no idea, people that had very bad feelings about the building, have, returned and come back to the building. And, our sponsorship has never been better, with large corporations. Our membership has never been higher. Our Tivoli Society has grown exponentially. And I think that is due to a large part of John, but I think that he has done a fantastic job in, when he started, it was John, it was myself, it was Jeff Kleiber in the box office, and then Susie Miller, who is no longer with us. And it was literally the four of us. And in his time, we have created a marketing position, which was desperately needed. We created a development position, which again was desperately needed. Somebody to help, with fundraising and grant writing and Tivoli Society and board dealings. And so we've created those positions. We've now also taken over New Spire Arts. We've created, an assistant theater manager position, which was desperately needed because John was burning himself out. And honestly, if anything happened to John before this person was created, we would be in a very tough place. And now we've created an assistant technical manager position. So I've been here 17 years, and I finally have an assistant to help me out. So I think he's done a great job with taking the staff that he had and then creating new positions. And then the positions that were hired were people that not only became a great part of the team, but have also become an extension of our family. And that's kind of what I feel like this building is for me is, I have a family at home, but, I also have a family at work, and I am incredibly happy and proud of that. And I think everybody does a fantastic job. So I think John's stuff that won't get mentioned as much as, his legacy of building a strong team. So when he does leave, we are okay. We'll be fine. We know the steps he was taking, and we're kind of all on the same page. And, we will hire a theater manager that will hopefully, that's the goal, is to move the building, keep the building maintained, but continuing it to move forward the next 17 years or 20 years or however long the theater manager would be here for. I am incredibly sad to see him go, but I am incredibly excited to see him in the future, and he gets to spend time with his grandkids, and because this job is incredibly challenging, and he's done a fantastic job, and it takes a toll on people, and I am happy that he's choosing to leave before he gets bitter, before he gets uncomfortable, all of that stuff.
Again, Kara Norman from the Downtown Frederick Partnership.
I think overall, the Weinberg is, so big picture, the Weinberg is such a bigger force and entity and component of our community than it was, I guess it's 20 years ago. And so it is, because I think, and you mentioned several things, like programming, I'm just going to say programming in general is there's so many offerings to appeal to so many different audiences. Expansion of what's available to us in this community. The physical space, I mentioned the marquee just because it's just been so long on his wish list. But, physically inside that theater, so much has been done to make it a better space as an audience and a better space as a performer. I know there's still projects on the tickler list, but that's the upside of an old building. There's always something else to do. But as a consumer and I think as an entertainer or performer, the space has significantly improved, and those are big undertakings, both financially, but also as well as just the capacity to manage the project and keep track of all the parts and all of that. So, the Weinberg has been significantly improved in the 20 years, both physically and what you get the opportunity to see.
As for John, I thought I'd give him the last word by asking him if he believed that after all these years, from Vermont to Philadelphia to New York to Washington, D.C., and ultimately to Frederick, Maryland, with that stop in Virginia in between, it's been a long way since those farm days, right?
It's a long ways from the farm. It is a long ways from the farm. But in some ways not. In some ways it's the same ethic. There's a certain work ethic. I'm very proud of that. My daughter has a very strong work ethic. It's you get things done. So that's what I'm proudest of. We can name accomplishments, some of the physical, the marquee that's going in, the bar that's going in, all that stuff. So yeah, I've done some good things. I've done some things that were not so good. But at the same time, at the end of the day, yeah, I've probably made some changes, and I'm hoping that whomever comes in will continue that trend. And that the place will succeed. It's a beautiful place. It is. And Frederick should be very proud that they have this opportunity in a town where it costs you $3 to park. You can walk to 35 different restaurants. And we're not the only name in town anymore. You got all the stuff in the creek. You got Celebrate Frederick. You got all the concerts up there, and now the new art stages. I mean, there are opportunities. It's a very livable city, with enormous arts opportunities. So if I've had some help to move that needle along, then great. It's good.
And so with that in mind, we thought it would be a good idea to end this episode looking back on John Healey and his time at the Weinberg by playing some music that happened sort of within the orbit of the Could Be Better family. Stitch Early performed at a Frederick Music Showcase. I believe it might have been back in 2017, if I recall. Don't quote me on that, though. It was a thing that I used to run in conjunction with the Frederick News Post, and once a year in February at the Weinberg Center, they would allow me to book 3 or 4 local bands that have never really had the opportunity to play that stage. John was so kind enough to let us do that, and Stitch was one of the people who performed one year. So we thought we'd play the opening song from his set, complete with maybe a word or two from my very long, rambling, embarrassing introduction for the evening, but that's neither here nor there. You can also check out Stitch Early and his podcast on the Could Be Better Network. You don't want to miss that. But for now, I just want to say as we end, thank you so much, John Healey, for coming to Frederick, and thank you so much for being kind to me personally through all these years, for letting local music into the Weinberg Center for the Arts and championing the arts here in Frederick, Maryland. Thank you again, John. Here, everybody, is Stitch Early.
So we're going to start this off like this. Listen, now everybody in the 301, get your hands up high like you're reaching for sun. Let me see them side to side like you're waving for some. Say yeah, yeah. Now everybody in the 301, get your hands up high like you're reaching for sun. Let me see them side to side like you're waving for some. Say yeah, yeah. Now clap your hands now, people, clap, clap. Clap your hands now, people, clap, clap. Clap your hands now, people, clap your hands. Y'all ready to have a good time tonight? This is just the warm-up right here. This like the layup line. Y'all ready to have a good time? Front row, y'all ready to have a good time tonight? Y'all with me tonight? I just want to make sure. I like a lot of crowd participation. So clap your hands now, people, clap your hands. Y'all feel good? Y'all feel good? Was that good for y'all? That's a nice little warm-up.
The Could Be Better podcast was recorded at the Could Be Better Studios somewhere in the middle of Maryland.
This state-of-the-art facility has welcomed in everyone from Ringo Starr to 50 Cent, and it can accommodate all of your podcast needs.
What?
Never mind. If you like what you hear, follow us on Instagram, Facebook, Threads, and Zanga. Do not forget to check out our website, www.couldbebettermeh.com.
Also, please leave us a review on Apple Podcasts, Overcast, Spotify, Google Podcasts, wherever you listen to podcasts if you want to make sure we come back for a 4th season, or don't, and maybe we'll listen to you.
Well, plus don't forget to check out all of our brother and sister podcasts exclusively within the Could Be Better Network.
And if all else fails, hey, at least come out to a show every now and then.
Wait, we do shows?
This is so much fun. I'm Chris Perry.
And I'm Colin McGuire. Thank you so much for listening, everybody. And don't forget, this could always be better.
The Could Be Better podcast is proud to be a part of the Could Be Better podcast network. We're passionate about creating and using these platforms to dive into topics such as exploring lo-fi, impulsive, small, and otherwise overlooked artworks and creative practices, what happened in the world this week and how to laugh through or at it, and hearing stories from musicians of all walks of life. Check out these podcasts. Could Be Better podcast, This Is Not My Magnum Opus, The Weekly with Kiki, and a brand new show with Stitch Early called The Population, wherever you listen to podcasts. You can visit couldbebettermeh.com/podcasts in the show notes to see the current shows on the Could Be Better podcast network. Let's hang out as we figure out more about ourselves, the community around us, and why Ted Lasso is the greatest show of all time.